So Justin, if you didn't hear, just as you were logging on, Joe was mocking the death of Sorrel Brooke, who played Boss Hogg on the Dukes of Hazzard, famously was killed in an avalanche.
An avalanche of beer cans.
Actually, apparently it was colorectal cancer, so
that
got
is
a little
not. That's dark.
that got a little darker.
Fun.
You know what else is dark? Our topic tonight. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Friends
Fun.
Occasionally. We have three hosts with you here tonight. We've all chosen a very different background. We have backgrounds that are all over the place. I can't wait to hear any more about these as we keep going here tonight. But anyway, I got Justin and Joe in the house with us. Lots of just intro-y stuff today. Joe found out that Justin passed him for episodes hosted, and that's why he's here with us for a supernatural topic, apparently.
That's true.
He can't fall behind anymore. And Brett's taking the night off tonight to earn some marriage points, he said. So, real quick here, I guess, let's hear from you guys. What have you been up to this last week? Let's go, Justin. Besides serving wieners to old ladies in the rain, what have you been up to?
That needs
Isn't
context.
that enough?
Okay, so like I said, that needs context. I'm very tired right now, which I realize is not doing me any favors. So I'm going to. Today was the day of our yearly member appreciation picnic at work,
they really appreciated his member.
So yeah, that involves it's there's a grill with hot dogs and brats, there's popcorn, there's chips, but we've had these every year I've worked here except for I think 2 that were called off during COVID, and all but one of those years it has been pouring down rain. This year was no exception.
Jeez.
And so it was basically me and the bunch of the other employees out there for like 4 hours in the rain, serving free food to people who don't always appreciate it, or try to like get freebies and just stuff it into plastic bags to take home. Or there was a guy who came up to the little thing of lemonade, and he had like a freaking big gulp thing from McDonald's or whatever the hell they call their drinks, and he just like starts taking the little cups of lemonade and starts pouring them into the big gulp thing until we finally noticed and told him to stop. It was a great day. It's a great freaking day. Aside from that, oh god, what have I been doing aside from that? This day feels like it's been like 2 months long. Yes, a few weeks ago we talked about Secret Invasion, and possibly the best thing to come out of that show is it prompted me to go and see what, if anything, was still worth reading or experiencing in American comics, because if that was the best that Western comic books can put forth, then the genre is dead. So I've been searching out mainly at the library, but just kind of in general, what else is out there that's contemporary and not terrible. So I've had mixed results so far. The best one I've stumbled across is a series called Black Hammer by Jeff Lemire. I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce his name. But yeah, it is. It's sort of like WandaVision. If WandaVision had the balls to admit that the person who trapped a bunch of people in a little town that's walled off from the rest of the world, it was actually a villain, instead of copping out at the end like that show did. But yeah,
it was complicated.
I think they did do that in Doctor Strange, and then Joe called it a character killer, or whatever he called it. Was your term
assassination?
Assassination.
Character assassination.
Even though she was evil in that whole show. So
yeah.
But it was complicated.
Isn't it always?
Black Hammer also complicated. It centers on an actual group of heroes, so it's not just like a couple of superpowered people and then a bunch of normies. But a lot of them have parallels to established heroes. Like there's Abraham Slam, who's essentially Captain America. There is a character called Golden Gale, who is essentially Shazam. There's a Martian Manhunter kind of parallel, and they're all trapped here after supposedly defeating like the big bad of their world. No, they don't know how they got there, but they've been trapped there for 10 years, and there's not a lot of superheroics that go on so far in the series, but there's a lot of character depth and drama and whatnot, and it's worth a read so far. It's different, it's interesting. It gets really freaking dark at times, but yeah, it's something I'm happy I stumbled across, and if you get the chance, I'd say check it out. Black Hammer by Jeff Lemire. Lemire, however you actually say his name. I'm not sure.
Black Hammer.
Yeah. The only other one I've read so far a bit of was I picked this up because of the name basically because of who wrote it. It's a comic book by Margaret Atwood, believe it or not, called Angel Catbird, and I'm like, okay, I saw it in the library and I saw the name and I'm like, that can't possibly be the Atwood that I'm thinking of. I pick it up and yeah, it was her. So I'm like, okay, what can an established novelist do with the comic book, scene? And the answer is, sadly, a lot of schlock. It's not good. It's incredibly punny and tropey, and she was trying to be more clever than she was, and it nowhere near as good as the other one I'm reading. So,
you know when that was released?
I can find out real quick. I've returned it to the library, but I can take a quick look. But yeah, the premise of that one is basically there's a guy who's working for a corporation that is, of course, evil, that is being run by a guy who could not be more transparently evil if he tried. But his boss is he's like a half rat. There are a bunch of employees that are like half cats. He himself ends up becoming if the experiment goes wrong, he ends up becoming like part cat, part owl, and part human, and it just gets really weird and dumb, and apparently was released in 2016. So
weird.
Yeah, but it's got like 4 volumes out at the library, but I stopped after 1 because it's just like, this is cringe. But I mean,
good for her for trying to branch out, I guess.
Yeah, I can't fault her for trying. Yeah, but yeah, I've rambled for enough for the moment. Joe, what about you? What have you been up to?
Oh boy. I'm also quite tired.
Woo!
Went to a couple concerts last week, which were fun. Last Thursday, I saw Nathaniel Rateliff and the Night Sweats. And
you were
that's one of their songs. I see what you did there. How do you know that?
Go on.
What were you going to say, Justin?
I was just going to say I'm tired enough. I heard you say Daniel Radcliffe in the Night Sweats, and I was.
It's funny you say that because I made that joke to Alexis. I was like, "What if it was Daniel Radcliffe?"
That's a little.
That'd be weird.
In the Italian movie, you don't want to watch that one.
Anyway, they're a really cool band. Nathaniel Rateliff has an interesting voice, I would say. I like his voice, but they play. It's kind of like a very throwback to like probably 60s and 70s like soul R&B kind of music for the most part, but it's a bunch of white hipstery looking guys. But I mean, like Nathaniel Rateliff has a great voice for it. He pulls some moves on stage. They have a horn section, the whole thing, but yeah, they put on a great show. And Sunday, I got to see one of my favorite artists, Jason Isbell, in the 400 unit. Jason Isbell is one of the greatest. I think he might be one of the greatest songwriters currently working, and he's also one of the greatest guitarists I've ever seen. And anybody who knows me knows that that's saying a lot. But he does a blend of kind of like, I would say country adjacent. I don't really love country music, at least not modern country, but he does more kind of like Southern rock and like a lot of more like stripped down acoustic stuff with like a little bit of a Southern twang in there on occasion. I mean, he's from Alabama, so it's hard to escape. But he just writes phenomenal songs and he just is a great performer. So it was awesome to get to see him live. Other than that, I don't know that we've really been watching a lot of new stuff. I did finally get around to watching the Super Mario Brothers movie, which I know has been talked about on this podcast. And much to Cody's chagrin, it both was and was not a good movie. It was Schrodinger's movie. No, I enjoyed it. I just think it could have been more. It was kind of exactly what I expected it to be, but I was on some level hoping that it would surprise me. There's just absolutely no depth to it whatsoever.
It's what you expected it to be. Come on. You expected that they were going to have a Smash Brothers scene in the movie. You expected that there was going to be Mario Kart. You expected that Luigi was going to be the one captured that they had to rescue, and the princess was going to be the most able fighter in the movie. Yeah, because
literally all of that is in the trailer.
You forgot none of that. Come on.
Literally all of that is in the trailer, and also you.
So you mean the movie was like the trailer? Boy, yeah, that's a concept. Great defense of it there.
Well, no, but you also just described literally everything that happens in the movie. There's no depth to it. It's literally just here's this thing. Here's the, hey, Mario Kart. Hey, look, it's like Smash Brothers.
Clearly
hey, look, it's
Seth Rogen's performance then. Maybe watch it again.
Anyway, I said I enjoyed it. I just wish it had a little more depth. And I mean, I believe you had tried to argue that it's a kid's movie, but Pixar and occasionally Disney have done some movies that work for kids, but also have a little more depth for adults.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible to do that, and they just didn't even try.
Wait, did you take mushrooms before you watched it?
No.
Oh, I don't know what it's like then.
Have you seen the price of mushrooms at the concession stand?
It's true.
Nobody can afford that.
It's true. I think I may have had a couple drinks.
Oh, that probably helped. Anyway.
It did help. Anyway, it was fun, but not amazing. The only other thing, Alexis and I just started watching the new season of a show that I think I mentioned on this podcast before, which is called The Great. And it's about the sort of rise and I'm guessing eventual fall of Catherine the Great, Empress of Russia. And it's a really weird show. Right in the opening credits, it says The Great, and then there's an asterisk and it says an occasionally true story. And it's just a ridiculous, just insane comedy. But it's
okay.
It's super beautifully shot. It's super well written. It's very clever. It's hilarious. I mean, it's not a totally over the top screwball comedy. There's some drama, but it's probably more comedy than drama. But it is in, I believe it's third season now on Hulu, and it's probably one of the better shows around right now. It's just a great time. But hey, speaking of Russia, maybe that will come into play when we get to our topic shortly.
Ooh. Okay.
What have you been up to, Cody?
I'll just do a couple of quick hits here for everybody. I recently finished one of the two novels I'm reading this summer called The Invisible Circus by Jennifer Egan. I was reading a couple of her books specifically this summer, and it's just a one-line summary. It's about a girl who essentially goes to Europe to retrace her deceased sister's last months alive, and it's kind of more of a drama, I guess, than anything else. So not really maybe my genre. I was hoping it was going to end up being, but I didn't know fully what it was about. But I give it a 7 out of 10. It was enjoyable enough to read, but not super recommendation worthy, I wouldn't say. My wife and I have started. Well, we started a while ago, maybe a couple weeks ago, watching The Mole on Netflix, the new season that they made. I know Brett has watched through that and said it was not that great, but so far we're enjoying it quite a bit. It's basically like if Anderson Cooper's The Mole got smutty with language only, but it's just funny because the contestants will be like, fuck, and you're like, whoa, that would have never flew on whatever ABC back in the day or whatever it was. But so far it's good. We're down to, I believe, the final 4 contestants right now from 12. So we've watched whatever that comes out to, 8 or 9 episodes so far of that, but really enjoying that so far. We'll get a full review in here in a bit. Continuing to read through that graphic novel series, East of West, that I picked up a while back, and plot has really escalated as far as what's happening in there right now. I think I'm on trade paperback number 8 out of 10. 7. No, 8, I think, out of 10. So getting to the end of that as well. Let me think. Anything else that I have been up to? Oh, I was mentioning to Joe before you hopped on, Justin, that tomorrow I'm going to one of my 2 concerts to finish up the year, which is Pink at Wrigley Field tomorrow. And but I was telling Joe, one of the funny things is Pat Benatar is one of the opening acts for Pink. So that was kind of out of left field when my wife told me that today. So that was kind of a shock, but excited for that because I don't feel like I've gone to a lot of concerts of Karen's people that she likes. So this is kind of a go see what she likes type thing. And then lastly, I think for me is I just want to pick a bone with somebody on the air.
What?
And this goes out to my mortal enemy, hashtag that bitch, Taylor Swift.
I'm right here, dude. Why are you talking to me?
Taylor Swift drops this announcement about her 1989 Taylor's Version album coming out, and she totally steals my fucking countdown for the Halloween party by putting her own countdown that ends 5 days before my countdown. And now everybody's checking her countdown and not my countdown.
Cody, can I just say something?
No, let's move on.
A lot more people care about one of those countdowns than the other. I'm not going to say which.
I know, and if somebody would tell her this to her face, she'd probably back off, but she doesn't, so it's fine. Anyway, I was laughing so hard earlier from the intro to this. I actually had a pain in the side of my chest. So, did anybody indulge themselves with any alcohol this evening? Just checking there. Justin, did you end up with anything?
Yeah, the only thing I've really got on hand that would mix at all is gin and tonic. So
Great.
I've got a gimlet. Yeah.
Okay. Joe is keeping it clean tonight.
I have some Italian sparkling mineral water with a little bit of a sugar-free cherry flavoring.
Beautiful. Joe straight edge now, if you guys didn't know that. So that's cool. And
one of us has to be straight.
There you go. I went for the traditional Russian vodka tonight in honor of our topic. It's mixed with a little lemon and comes out of a can. So just the way they would have had it back in the 1950s in Russia. I'm pretty sure. Well, that does bring us to our main topic tonight, ladies and gents. It's one of the most famous cases, I think, of kind of these unexplained mystery type things that are out there. You may have heard of this before. You may not have. A lot of things have been talked about on this topic, but we haven't talked about this topic. So that's really the version that we care about the most. This is the DYATLOV Pass in Russia, where in a one-line summary, essentially, we have 9 hikers that have been, let's call it disappeared, I guess, kind of, and then killed and then found. So that's the quick version of what we're talking about here. But before we do that, what did you guys know about this? How many times have you heard this case before? And what, if anything, did you look at prior to tonight?
I guess I'll go first. I knew the broad strokes of this for quite a while. I don't know where I first heard about it from. It might have been Unsolved Mysteries back in the day or something. But I knew the basic elements of it for a good long while. I didn't really start digging into it until we decided to do this as our topic this week. And I stumbled across a documentary, fairly recent documentary actually, from 2001. Excuse me, 2001. God, I'm tired. 2021, called an Unknown Compelling Force, that I found on Tubi, and it sounds like, from what I heard earlier, you guys may have watched it too. But yeah, I do have to hand it to them because I expected this to be just kind of a schlocky Discovery Channel style, what if it was alien Bigfoots or something like that, that sort of kind of take on things. But it honestly seems like the guy who directed this really was wanting to try and get to the truth of what happened, and he played it straight. He seems like he did actually go to Russia. He interviewed a bunch of people. He went to the site. So it sounds like he was doing legitimate investigative journalism, which is awesome. I also looked at a bunch of the crazier theories about what happened to these people, and we'll get to those because they're fun.
All right, Joe, how about yourself?
In Soviet Russia, Dyatlov passes you. To be honest, I think I had only heard the name of this incident before, and most likely because you have mentioned it multiple times in our group chat. I feel like you've been proposing this as a potential topic for a long time. So I was aware that there was an incident that occurred there, but I really didn't know any of the details of it. Oddly enough, I asked my wife if she had if she had ever heard of this incident, because she listens to a lot of like true crime and like podcasts about like mysterious murders and things like that. And she was like, fuck yes, I've heard of that incident. Like I've listened to like 50 podcasts about it. So
wow.
We should have got her on here, but
right.
Yeah.
As far as research goes, I did watch the same documentary Justin mentioned, which is also on YouTube. That's how I just searched Dyatlov Pass on YouTube to see what was on there, and that came up. It's like an hour and 45-minute long full documentary.
Yeah.
I watched a couple other YouTube videos that were shorter and of lesser quality, but some of those talked about some of the more interesting theories behind this that Justin was kind of hinting at and we'll discuss. And yeah, I mean, I read the Wikipedia article and like a couple other things online, but didn't have enough time really to get too deep on that.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know. We didn't coordinate watching this documentary. I'm not sure how this happened, but I ended up watching the same documentary as them, An Unknown Compelling Force. And one thing he really stressed in there was that every podcast or every like website kind of has like the same type of information repeated. And so he was kind of digging to find some deeper truths to all of this. So I watched that, and I did watch just because I was curious if they had an episode on this. BuzzFeed Unsolved, of course they did. It was predictably terrible, but I did watch that as well. And other than that, just prior information myself. This is a topic when I used to run my mystery club after school. We would research cases like this, and I know we've done this one at least twice, I think, with students. So I just feel like I had heard a lot about this, so I just kind of went with what I knew and what I found out recently here and put it all together to talk with you gents today. So there we go. Okay. So this is going to be an interesting case because I feel like the theories of this case really make it famous. The inconclusive evidence really kind of make this one famous as well. And then the bizarre evidence that is out there also kind of makes this one bizarre. So I guess just to start us off here, I had in the notes, and I took a lot of these from that documentary, but this has been called at times Russia's greatest unsolved mystery. And this is also an unusual one. This was kind of shown a lot in that documentary as well, which I hadn't really thought about before, but this is kind of one of those things where we do actually have a lot of the evidence from this case in terms of like photographs and diaries from the people that were there. And like, it's not just this, did it happen or didn't it happen type thing, which I feel like some of those cases are pretty famous as well. We know that this happened. We know that 9 people lost their lives out in the middle of very remote Russia. And it's just interesting that they have all the artifacts for that stuff. This takes place at roughly an area which locals referred to as Dead Mountain. So kind of adding to the flavor of fun, I guess, there on that one. Kind of reminds me of the one we did. Was one we did in the woods, the Bennington Triangle. It had like the weirdly named place as well like that. Okay, so I'm going to kind of run through an overview of what officially happened, and then feel free to jump in as I go through these, and then we'll talk about theories afterwards. And I apologize, at least I don't know if you would have done this the same way or not, Justin. I'm not going to get into the names of all the people that were, because to, somebody listening that doesn't necessarily, it's a lot of cast of characters to keep track of here who are going to meet a very short end.
You're going to say it's a lot of Yuris.
It is a lot of Yuris. It is also actually a lot of
Yuris, yes. But I do want to stress that prior to that documentary, as many times as I had looked up information on this case, I feel a little ashamed because I don't think I've ever really stopped to look at those 9 people as actual individuals who lost their lives out there for this event, whatever took place out there. So it was fascinating to me to hear like who the people were, like what kind of personalities they had, what maybe their hobbies were, what they were good at in college. Those were all details I hadn't really read before, and it really humanized, I think, the people that lost their lives out there more so than I've ever really thought about before. So that was a new angle to think about, at least on my side of all this. So
yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good point.
All right. Well, let's jump into this. We have 10 hikers who are college students in Russia, and one person had to turn back because he hurt his leg or something.
9 of them were students. One of them was a professor. Oh, yes.
Good call. One was like a 37-year-old guy or something, right? Who was not the age group, but fit in well, they said. So the documentary mentioned that they were basically going out on this pretty extended remote hike, and then the expected time that they'd be back would be so many days later. But there seemed to be some confusion in the documentary over whether or not there was like a case already open about them well before they should have even been back.
They explained that in the documentary like pretty quickly.
Clerical error.
Was that the clerical error with the date?
Yep.
Yeah, they said there was a document that they know was filled out. So the incident took place in February, I think 1959.
Good call, thanks.
And there was a document that they know for fact was filled out in March of that year, like after the investigation was underway. But whoever was filling out the document accidentally wrote February 6th as the date on it, and they just copied that date over to like the front of the case file. Mm-hmm. So like the fact that date was on the front of the case file like launched 1,000 conspiracy theories, but it's like it doesn't mean anything.
And we should point out that the earliest date that the group was supposed to report back in was, I believe, February 12th. So the fact that, 6 days earlier this report was supposedly filed, that has just churned up so much conjecture that it really is baseless in the end.
One clerical error can really change. Was that the Elisa Lam case we did? There was one we did too that had a date that was off too, and it like really changed how people's perspective on that was. I can't remember if that was the one or not, but I do recall there was one with like a date that was transcribed wrong or something.
It might have been. It's been a while since we've done
that. Got to get those details right, people. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to skip over that for right now. Let's go into, we have these hikers. They're going through pretty remote areas, as mentioned here, as this guy in the documentary was kind of retracing their footsteps more or less, of course, with the modern conveniences of snowmobiles and things of that nature, although even then he was not able to battle the elements and get up there as easily as he thought. They would get to more and more remote places, and they were actually headed to the actual place called Dead Mountain? That sounds right in my head, but they didn't make it there. They were headed somewhere that they didn't actually get to.
Yes. Yeah. It started with an O, I think. Mount.
Oh, yes.
Otolan or something like that.
That sounds, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can try to dig that up in the background.
So apparently, as they are going along this trek, they are taking a lot of photographs, and they're also writing in their journals. And that's why it's kind of interesting that we have these like firsthand artifacts from their quest. And the photographs have been used, we should say, like really analyzed a million times over, as you can imagine with this case. But they've been used to more or less prove a few things here and there, and also raise some questions here and there, depending on what the photograph is of.
Just to interject for a second.
Yep.
They were trying to reach a mountain called Gora Otorten, which in Mansi, which is like the native language, means don't go there. So they're just really bad at listening to the names of these mountains they're visiting. You have don't go there and Dead Mountain. And they're like, well, let's go there.
Wow, don't go there. That's fantastic.
It really is.
Okay, well, we have hikers go up. They get as far as this place, which PS was not named that, right? Because one of the hikers themselves was named Dyatlov. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was like the leader.
Okay, he was, the trail leader. And so his name lives on, not in the way you'd want your name to live on, probably, though, as everybody died out there. But essentially, they get out there, whatever conditions. We'll get into some stuff that happened here in a bit. They pitch their tent, and they're staying at this pass, which looks like slightly north of a riverbed, if I recall correctly. This is wintertime, though, so everything is heavily covered in snow at this point. And then we see that they don't come back, essentially. And then we have rescue parties, or search parties, I should say, well, both, out to look for them, finding nothing for a decent while. They found the tent pretty early on, and we can talk about the tent here briefly. The tent is basically shredded, and there's controversy over the tent, which we can talk about here. There is controversy over whether it was destroyed somehow, whether someone had cut into the tent or someone had cut themselves out of the tent to escape the tent, which is a really bizarre statement to make.
Yes.
We can come back to that in a bit here. We have diaries that were found abandoned in the tent. Much of their cold weather gear was found abandoned in the tent, some of it still folded even. There are some photographs that they found on a camera, including one that shows some sort of light burst or something out of focus. You can't really tell what that is. That has also launched some speculative theories here we can talk about in a bit. And let's see what else we have here. It was on, actually it took them, it says actually took, this was weird. Yeah, this was a weird part of the documentary. It says there were the two guys that were on the search party, and they both found the tent on the second day, which the tent was partially snow covered as well, but they didn't actually officially find the tent until day 4.
Yeah, that was bizarre. And they said that the two who supposedly initially found the tent did not look inside the tent.
Yeah.
So
that's there.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the two people has said who originally found the tent refused to go back to see it again once they went back to look at it in more detail also, which seemed really weird to me.
Yeah.
Unless maybe those were like your friend. We should mention a lot of the people in the search parties were friends of the people who went missing. Other college students and whatnot. So maybe if you saw the tent in that condition, you would assume the worst. I don't know. I think you would still search, though. That's weird.
I would, yeah.
But we find no bodies in the tent. So even though we have a tent, we still have none of the hikers out there. So there was some initial hope we should mention as well that maybe wherever these people went, they got out or had refuge someplace out of the elements. And we find out that's not the case, of course, here. All right, we find footprints in the snow, and this is a point I'm going to come back to a few points later on today, but we don't see any shoe prints per se, according to most reports on this, but we can debate that later on. We do finally find 2 bodies. 2 of the hikers are found half naked, and they had what appeared to be like they had a fire next to them for a while. There's debris from a fire burning next to them. We have Mr. Dyatlov is found next, and he also is not wearing element-appropriate clothing, which, again, they had at the tent, warmer clothing than these people were found in. He's found dead as well. One of the 2 girls is found after that. She is also dressed a little bit warmer, but she also mysteriously does not have on hat, gloves, or boots. And the direction they both seem to be, she seemed to be moving toward the tent based on body orientation, not away from the tent. And then they found a 5th body, which also seemed to be moving towards the tent. Okay, then at this point, we have quite a time span that happens here. We don't find the other 4 for quite a while. Meanwhile, we have autopsies going on for the 5 that have been found. And, amongst the other things they find in the autopsy, we have bruises, abrasions, cuts, particularly on the hands, the knuckles, the cheeks. There's some speculation that some of it could have been from falling over. into the ground or the ice. I mean, I'm sure at some point maybe they might have bumped against a tree or something in some of the thicker lands as well. But the official autopsy here says hypothermia. Interestingly, we have the government, which we're going to talk about them, I'm sure, here coming up as well. They buried the hikers 100 miles away from their home. And this actually causes a pretty sizable outcry in Russia in terms of where these people are going to be buried and exactly what happened to them. And eventually they give in and they move the bodies back to more of their home area. Funeral procession was very large for these 5, and all of it, they said in the documentary here at least, was watched by the KGB. So the government is definitely paying attention to this event. As to why, we can talk about that in a bit with the theories. We have another hiker a couple weeks later who said that he saw, this is a different hiker that they talked about, who said he saw some kind of mysterious spherical shaped object in the sky, which led to a possibility of a rocket test or some other theories. Again, we can talk about in a bit. Okay, let me skip ahead just a bit here to when they find the other 4. So they find the other 4 bodies. They show in the documentary as kind of a, what do they call it? An avalanche, like spoon, or it had some term, but it like pokes through the snow really far down, and then they like do like a jerk of their wrist and pull it back up to see if they catch anything, more or less.
It has like a hook on the end.
Oh yeah.
And
he pulled it up and it had flesh on it. Ugh.
Yeah, super gross, right? So they have found, I mean, can you imagine the painstaking process to go out there and do that with that thing? They find under 12 feet of snow the final 4 bodies. So this is all 9 of them now. And speculation that they may have been trying to generate some body heat by staying close to each other at the time, or maybe for other things of that nature. Okay, let's see. I don't want to go into that yet. Let's do a couple more evidence tidbits to this, which is
do you want to talk about the condition of those bodies, or is that what you don't want to get into yet?
No, that's what I think we should get into right now. Okay. Joe, you want to give some comments on those?
Yeah, it sounds gross. No, I mean, it sounds like these 4 bodies, I mean, they were buried under like 12 feet of snow. So obviously that's a lot of pressure to, put on a human body. But it sounds like they were in much worse condition than the others, and in some ways possibly questionably so. One of the women was missing her tongue, and it doesn't seem like there's any real explanation for that.
Yeah.
They also oh, go ahead, Justin.
I've heard it as the whole tongue. I've heard it as part of her tongue. And if it's part of the tongue, it could have been a matter of she fell and the impact of her jaw hitting the ground, the hard frozen ground, could have actually cut off part of her tongue. That is a thing that can happen.
Like she bit through her tongue, you're saying?
I think I believe the autopsy said like it was like the tongue and like diaphragm, or it was like the tongue and something was not present. So it makes it sound like the entire tongue is missing.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if it was just a part of it, then like you said, that would make sense if, they got covered in avalanche and bit part of her tongue off in the trauma. But but it also sounds like there were other injuries on the bodies that almost seemed like they could have been like intentional, like possibly from conflict. Like one of the bodies specifically had injuries to like the temple area where there was like internal bleeding there. It sounds like they were like weirdly focused and not necessarily the sort of like generalized like crushing trauma you would expect if it was from an avalanche.
And they sounded pretty intense too. I think a lot of them, the more egregious ones, like the skull injury, and one of the women had basically her chest was caved in where like her ribs had punctured her heart or her lungs. I don't remember which, but they compared it to like the force of getting hit by a car.
Yeah, it was her heart. They specifically said her heart was punctured. That stood out to me because it sounds so horrific. So
yeah.
Yeah, I think there were one or two that had broken ribs.
Mm-hmm.
Also there. Let me see. Anything else we want to throw down as far as the facts of the case here? Let's see.
Also one of them was missing their eyes.
Yes. One was missing their eyes, which they speculated. They were the four that they found last essentially were like over the river.
Yes.
So they speculated like maybe somehow the river water would have eaten away the eyes. Yeah. I don't know, but
or fish or what have you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just had it right here. Where the hell did it go? Well, I don't see it now, but essentially they oh yeah, that's the name of the documentary. So the case was closed and they said they were killed by an unknown compelling force officially. This was reopened as recently as 2018, so almost 60 years afterwards. And they again came to very little conclusion, I would say, on this, other than some theories perhaps we can talk about here. But let's see, what else do we have? Mentioned that. I'll save that for a little bit here. Is there any other facts, quote unquote, in this case?
I mean, I think as far as just like hard facts, that's at least the majority of it.
Yeah. I guess they mentioned at least two people, their clothing tested positive for elevated levels of radiation, which we could throw in with one of the theories here in a little bit. And yeah, okay. So I think maybe that's essentially the facts of the case. So we have 9 people who died in very grisly way up on top of this very remote area. And then the question with this case has always been, what the hell happened to them? I mean, how do you explain this bizarre mishmash of things and 9 people killed or died in some manner which is not even really that consistent from person to person? It's not like, oh, they all drowned in a flood. Like, we have very disparate directions they went in as far as running away from the tent and who was found where and what condition they were found in when they found those people. It's all craziness.
Although they did, when they initially left the tent, the footsteps were all kind of going lockstep in the same direction, and then they split off. So that, I think that's important to note.
That's also curious, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I have some more information here yet, but of course, I think maybe we move into what possibly could have happened out there. So I know, Justin, you have a lot of theories. We have obviously a lot of theories here from this documentary itself. Joe has found the Russian Yeti photograph that one of the people took on the hike itself.
Do we want to start with that?
Which the documentary has tried to cover up by saying it may have been one of the people on the hike, but we know better.
That filmmaker is clearly in the pocket of Big Yeti.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, let's talk about the Russian Yeti. Theory number 1. What do we have for or against this? I mean, this is kind of a wacky one.
Oh, they get wackier. I guess I can take points for a little bit. Anyone can interject at any point.
Wrong.
Okay, you can't interject at any point. So, anytime someone goes missing out in the woods or out in the mountains or whatever, it seems like at some point someone brings up the theory that Bigfoot did it, or in this case, a Yeti did it, because there are stories of like big, hairy, ape-like men type creatures kind of all around the world. So it's not surprising that this came up as as a possible quote unquote theory for what happened to these guys, to these folks. They were out in the middle of nowhere. They got attacked by this, native creature that lives out there, and the rest is history, according to that. But you mentioned that in the documentary that they tried to explain this photo as just one of the hiking group, and it does kind of just look like a dude. I mean, the arms don't look terribly long to me. They would be bundled up against the elements normally, except for when they died. So that would explain kind of like the dark kind of homogeneous look to the outline. And I think the documentary also mentioned that in this particular roll of film, a lot of the other photos are kind of comedic in nature. Like they showed a few with like them kind of tussling in the snow and whatnot.
Well, they're college kids, so I mean, it wouldn't be shocking if they were playing around. Like maybe one of them was purposely trying to pose like a Yeti or something for all we know.
Right. Yeah. But I've heard a different take on this particular photo. That it's not one of them. Yeah.
Breaking news.
This is where things start to get weird. That is not one of them. Scoob. And it's not a Yeti, but that it was someone who was following them. And they happened to catch a glimpse of him and get a shot of him before he could duck away.
Ruh-roh.
And I've heard that this also might factor into why they decided to pitch their tent where they did. And it might have also played into what happened to them afterwards, but that is leading into a different theory. But this particular photo has a lot of commentary about it.
I mean, it looks like the top and the bottom half are two different colors. It's the closest I could give it is it looks like Lon Chaney's Werewolf Man from Universal Monsters.
Reading apparently in 2014, the Discovery Channel produced a documentary, air quotes, called Russian Yeti, The Killer Lives.
Ooh.
I've heard it's terrible.
Yeah, in which the hosts, so this is from a website I'm looking at. This is a quote from the host of the show, Mike Lebecki. When I found out one of the students was missing a tongue, immediately I knew this was not caused by an avalanche. Something ripped out the tongue of this woman. That something, he naturally concluded, could only have been a Yeti.
All I can think of.
So that might be something to check out at some point.
I mean,
go on.
As far as like evidence on this one, you can never have evidence for Yeti, but I guess maybe you could point to like the tent being all shredded up and like something happened very quickly that they all had to leave the tent. Like if someone was a large monster was trying to get into your tent while you were in there, that would probably be cause to get the hell out of the tent maybe as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
I guess maybe there's that part, but I don't know that I see proof beyond that.
To give that documentary, quote unquote, another layer of introspection. I'm using the wrong word, but I'm tired. Credulity, thank you. So this is from DYATLOV PASS.com, which is a treasure trove of information about this whole thing.
Okay.
In the section about the Yeti explanation, this show about Russian history declines to interview any Russian historians. Instead, we're treated to interviews with cryptid proponents, Jeff Meldrum and Igor Burtsev. It goes on a little bit.
Igor sounds pretty Russian.
Yes, but he's not a historian. He's a cryptid specialist. Burtsev complains that the production came to him with a preconceived agenda. Quote, I was interviewed by Russian Yeti, The Killer Lives director, Neil Rawls, too. I understood that he was making a program to fit the solution of the puzzle already under the ready answer. And he tried to get from me the same answer about fault of the Yeti in group's death. And this is translated from Russian, so it's a little broken. For this, he was shooting me for many times, asking only one question. Could be Yeti a reason of the death? But I couldn't agree and rejected that. So basically, it sounds like the director just kept pressing him to try and get a soundbite saying that, yeah, a Yeti could have done this. And even a cryptid specialist was not willing to do that for him.
They were like, nah.
Yeah.
That ain't it, dog. Okay, anything else on Russian Yeti?
I mean, of all the unlikely answers, I feel like this is the least likely, so...
Oh, don't say that.
You haven't seen the theories I have.
Oh boy.
I guess we should let's go to number 2 here. We should probably throw this one out there. Avalanche, because this is one of the more famous ones as well. Evidence for or against an avalanche. What do we see here?
Ooh. There's snow everywhere.
There is snow everywhere. I'm a snow expert, but
this one actually has a ton going for it and a ton going against it.
Agreed.
The major evidence going against it says that the slope in the area where they were around their tent was not sufficiently steep to be, conditions for an avalanche. And on face value, that seems pretty cut and dry. But there are other factors at play. See, when the group, picked the spot for their tent, they didn't just, set it up on top of the snow, because the snow was deep. So on the side of the hill, they cut into the snow that had built up. And this left that disrupted the overall stability of the snowpack. And if you live anywhere that's cold, like I do, I live pretty far north, you know that in the middle of winter, snow builds up layers, and not every layer has the same consistency, has the same, hardness, the same type of friction. And by disrupting that, it's altered the conditions that would be necessary to cause things to fall. Because
you're talking about the delayed slab avalanche?
Yes. And being that it wasn't as sturdy as it had been, there's this drop off where there didn't used to be one. I do believe there were accounts saying that it was quite windy that night, Yep, the wind could have piled up snow higher up on the slope, and given the combination of that and the conditions that they themselves made, it could have caused that to let go and sweep away and basically sweep towards their tent. Especially if you factor in something called katabatic wind, which I had never heard of until I started looking at this, but that's where wind in a colder from what I understand, it's Greek meaning like descending wind. So like wind from a colder section, higher elevation, hits objectively warmer. It's a lot of technical stuff that I don't 100% understand, especially as tired as I am. But basically, it can have a higher pressure pushing down a slope than it would under normal circumstances. So all of these things together could have caused the snow to let loose and actually, cause an avalanche towards their camp.
I'm guessing this is the same thing you're drawing from, but it looks like there was a study in January of 2021 that managed to model how this specific type of avalanche could have caused this incident.
Yeah.
And that's the most recent evidence I really found regarding any of this.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of fascinating, but go on though.
Well, I was just going to say, it also explains how some of the weird injuries could have been caused by the avalanche as well.
Mm-hmm. Maybe not the crushed chests and the blow to the side of the head. Those are still kind of anomalous, but in terms of something that might have chased them out of the tent, I honestly think this is one of the more plausible theories out there.
I was just going to say, if we run this through, okay, so were they sleeping at the time? Do we know that? I guess we don't know because they can't tell us, but
I think that's the working assumption.
So if you heard the rumble, maybe I don't know if this type of avalanche would have a rumble, but if you heard an avalanche coming towards you, that would be enough to wake me up and get me the hell out of the tent as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. Especially if I knew what that noise was, and I don't know if they would have, but then I could see them cutting even the tent from the inside to get out as quick as they possibly frigging could.
Yeah, without bothering to put on their gear just to try and get to safety.
It does raise questions, and I think this was when my students and I did this one years ago. I think this was the solution they came up with, because it does fit a lot of the not all, but it does fit a lot of the injuries. If you were hit by a fast-moving chunk of snow, that certainly could leave an impact. It would cause you to not have time to grab some of those warm winter gear things. Although I guess I don't know why you wouldn't be sleeping in those to begin with. But anyway, that's kind of interesting. I didn't really think about that before. But
I mean, as far as the injuries go, this thing I'm reading, like related to this model they did, it seems like the theory is that it could have formed, like it could have basically thrown like snow and ice blocks at them, which that could have caused some of the injuries that look like somebody getting, struck in various places. So in other words, like that's not what actually killed them, but they could have sustained, these various injuries as a result of this small avalanche, which I mean, that makes sense to me, I guess.
Like harder chunks were in the snow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never thought of that. Okay.
And katabatic wind, I've based on different reports I've looked at, it can reach speeds anywhere between 20 meters per second and 81 meters per second, and that can deliver a lot of force if it's chucking something along as it's blowing.
So we have a lot of evidence that this one could be the case. What do we have as evidence that this is not the answer?
The initial reports of the slope of the hill. There's the matter of the radiation. We can get to that in a bit. Obviously an avalanche wouldn't account for that. It doesn't account for the strange lights in the sky, if those are at all related. And there were a few other anomalous things, like there was mention of a flashlight that had been found on top of the tent, and more than that, on top of the snow on top of the tent, which means that it's implied that someone had placed it there, because if it was just tossed around by an avalanche, it was not going to end up on top of the snow.
Right.
So there are some smaller anomalous things, but honestly, I think this is one of the most plausible explanations for what happened.
They mentioned and this is something I hadn't ever noticed before because I never took the time to actually analyze this a lot, but I think it was the documentary, they said they compared the two photographs of the one, like when they were at pitching the tent and they had the camp set up, and then the one of when they found the tent destroyed. And one thing they pointed out was the ski poles that were stuck in the snow around the tent basically were the same as they were in the same depth of snow as they were after whatever happened had happened.
That is true.
So that, I don't know how that would work with an avalanche. And also, I'm not an avalanche expert, but I mean, the tent was definitely more than partially exposed. I don't know if an avalanche would cover the tent.
Depends
if it were rolling down. I mean, it seems weird that the tent would be that exposed if
it would depend
under an avalanche.
I guess there are a lot of for one, if the wind was that heavy, it could have blown the snow, and it wouldn't have necessarily all settled there.
True.
Also, for all we know, maybe they heard the rumbling of this avalanche. That's what caused them to start fleeing from the tent. And if they did get hit by snow or whatever, maybe it didn't actually hit them at the tent. Maybe it was after they started fleeing that they started actually getting struck by parts of this avalanche.
And there's also the fact that the rescue team didn't get to the area until weeks later.
Yeah.
So wind could have also maybe carried some of the snow away.
Yeah, it could have uncovered it.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that, but to me it seems at least something to consider.
I think another damning piece for the avalanche is if you look at the position of the bodies in relation to where the tent originally was, coupled with the fact that even the first two they found had it seemed like evidence of they had started a fire where they were for a while. But regardless, an avalanche doesn't last forever. And if we're saying the avalanche didn't fully cover the tent, why wouldn't the people who had gotten to the west or whatever out of the way have gone back to the tent for more clothing at that point? That's probably not easy to walk through, but at the same time, you can't say the snow is so deep and the tent is exposed in between.
That is a good point.
So I don't know.
Go on.
Well, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm imagining this, but I feel like they said in this documentary that they had traveled a decent distance away from the tent. Maybe by the time they got around to trying to get back to the tent, hypothermia was setting into such an extent that they just could not physically do it.
Yeah, that's possible. I'm trying to find a map of the actual bodies here. And I'm failing to find that at the moment.
I know I stumbled across
I know the furthest people, I don't know if it was the people in the river or where they were, but they had estimated that with as bad as the conditions were, it probably would have taken them upwards of an hour.
Yeah.
To walk to where they were. Or I suppose conversely could have been carried there much quicker by an avalanche, but then you wouldn't have 4 bodies probably deposited directly next to each other either.
True.
Oh, the mystery.
But you know what else might cause someone to flee a tent at maximum speed?
New theory.
A wolverine.
Oh.
This is a legitimate theory I stumbled across.
Oh, no.
Okay. I thought he was in Canada first, but go on.
Snicked.
No, see, he was having a throwdown with Omega Red like he did back in the day.
Okay.
No, but Wolverines they're little assholes. They'll attack things significantly bigger than them. They don't back down from much of anything.
Just like Tom Petty.
And we were all thinking it.
And the idea behind this one is that a Wolverine in the area smelled the food that they had that evening, made its way into the tent. They discovered it there. They may have tried to fight it off. But Wolverines aren't going to back down from that. But the interesting thing about Wolverines is that they are also mustelids. So in the same family as weasels, ferrets, and skunks. And all mustelids can stink. They have the glands. And the theory is that between the ferocious attack of the Wolverine and the stink that it emitted, it drove the hikers out of the tent as quickly as they could. Some of them shedding their clothes along the way because the smell was so overpowering, and hypothermia killed them. I don't put much stock in this theory. It is one that I found, and it is...
I suddenly believe the Yeti is not the least likely theory.
Right?
Oh, just wait. Because this would not explain the horrible, like, bone-crushing blows that they received, or anything like that. But it's a theory that's out there. It doesn't seem terribly plausible to me, but I wanted to at least mention it because I thought it would be amusing.
I had not heard that one before, so that's a thing. That's a thing. Okay, well, let's see what else we have here. What else can we look at that is kind of mundane here? Wolverine. Oh, wow. Okay.
Well, if Wolverine's not your speed, there's the possibility of a reindeer.
A reindeer.
The idea behind this one is one was in the area and trying to go down the slope, and it got to the point where they had chopped away the slope, didn't realize that it had been chopped away, and fell onto the tent. And in its panic, it stomped a couple of them to the point where they got the injuries that they had, tore up the tent, and they were able to get out of the tent, drag the injured people away before the reindeer bounded off. But at that point, it was too late to save them. Too late to save the tent, and hypothermia did the rest.
God, I wish that didn't make so much sense.
I mean, do you want to go back to mundane, Cody?
Yeah, sure.
I thought it was interesting because I haven't really seen this mentioned a lot of places outside of the documentary, but you would think it would be, which is the possibility of them being murdered by the Mansi, who are like the indigenous people there. I mean, it's known that they inhabit that region. They're the ones who gave the mountains the names. And this documentary posits that the students possibly there was that one guy who's part of the party that was taking the filmmaker out to the place, who seemed to have a theory that the students maybe stole something valuable from like a Mansi religious shrine and they got murdered as revenge. But it seemed like there were other theories that maybe they were like venturing too close to like a religious area, and that the indigenous folk murdered them as such. Someone even seemed to say, was it that criminologist? Someone suggested that maybe there was like a blood sacrifice angle to it. But it seemed like there there are various reasons people think that the Muncie may have just murdered them. What did you guys think about all that?
I mean, there was a lot of detail about that culture in the documentary, and I have to say that's not an angle I had studied before, I don't think, with the students. I'm not even sure murder was something that was covered, really, when we looked at it before, but it was interesting because as you said, had a couple of reasons in there, like sacred grounds, or maybe like they had taken something off of a site as they were walking up the hills, not knowing that, or maybe, even within that culture, there had been somebody who didn't necessarily even agree with the rest of the group of people that might have taken a real affront to having trespassers out on their land. It may have been like a renegade Muncie that had gone after them. I mean, it's interesting.
And also interesting is that there's a bit of a Venn diagram between college students and indigenous peoples of this area of Russia. And where the overlap, the part where the overlap is drugs. Bear with me. So there's a second set of indigenous people in this area besides the Muncie called the Khanty. They're not as numerous, but in their societal traditions, they collect fly agaric mushrooms for the purposes of religious rites or that sort of thing. The problem is, and I swear I'm not making this up, it's also on the DYATLOV PASS site. Fly agarics in their normal raw state are they're poisonous. They're not just hallucinogenic. They will kill you. So the Khanty people, they tend to hang them up from fir trees to let them dry, because drying them out reduces the toxicity and makes them edible to the point where you'll be okay afterwards. Only problem is, it's sort of a problem, because reindeer also have a taste for these, and they can process them without actually dying. So another source of the hallucinogenic material they get from these is, and I swear I'm not making this up, reindeer piss. Because when the reindeers process it, what comes out is potable. It can't possibly taste good. I will link you to this because I can already tell you're not believing me. I
really want to make a Jeopardy joke and say that that's what they would call a potent potable.
So only post this to the chat so you can actually see for yourselves.
All of your theories involve reindeer. I gotcha.
A surprising number do, actually.
It was Santa.
So if it was an indigenous person, in this case a Khanty, that killed them, the idea is either that one was following them, or a group were following them, again possibly lending credence to the quote-unquote Bigfoot photo as being someone who was tailing them, who had partaken of one version or another of the fly agaric hallucinogen, perhaps saw the glowing lights in the sky that have been mentioned in passing on occasion, took that as a sign that these people were trespassing, and decided to follow their vision and kill them. A side theory of this is that the college students themselves found some fly agaric mushrooms, decided to get high, and decided to eat them, got high themselves, and in their hallucinogenic impaired state, destroyed their tent, wandered off into the cold dark of the night, and froze to death. Possibly got into a fight and broke each other's ribs and skulls in the process. Again, it's a weird theory. Perhaps not. Bizarrely, it might not be as improbable as the Wolverine, but it's something that's been considered.
I gotta put out here, and I don't live in Russia, nor have I been to Russia, but February is not the ideal mushroom growing season. So the fact that they were walking along and picked a mushroom, as a matter of fact here, good old Russia Beyond, the website, says the main season is September to October. I just don't see them happening across some mushrooms on their way up this hill.
Yeah, and I can't imagine it would take months for them to dry hanging from a tree or anything. So
They hit a time warp, and that's a whole nother thing here.
That is another theory, actually.
Jesus Christ.
But no. We'll get to that when we get to it. I don't know if I put much stock in the mushroom theory, but it's an interesting look into a sliver of an indigenous culture in the Russian wilderness.
Well, maybe let's take your mushroom idea, but let's maybe spin it to something that I hate to say these words, but it's slightly more plausible. Which is maybe they were having some sort of reaction, but to some sort of chemical that happened to be in the atmosphere or the air at the time. So there is another theory that this was a government cover-up because of some chemical that had been tested in this area that unfortunately these poor kids just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. They were hit with this chemical. And I mean, this could really go, 1,000 different ways as far as what the effects of this chemical could have been. Maybe hallucinogenic, maybe it was something that drove them crazy out of the tent, maybe they were hearing things, auditory, I don't know. Is there any chance that this is a government cover-up due to something that they were experiencing? And do we want to roll this in with the photographs? I don't know. Is that the same theory or is that a different theory?
I mean, different theory. Okay. You could connect them.
Well, I mean, I almost feel like we could roll. There are like
a lot.
Numerous. There are also numerous theories about different things that could have caused some sort of mass hallucination amongst them, and I almost kind of want to just roll all those together because I don't want to be here all night.
Okay. Sure.
But yeah, I mean, there's that theory about the chemical. I mean, there are theories that maybe natives somehow exposed them to something. There's a theory that there's some sort of infrasonic sound that in certain conditions could cause some sort of snow madness and turn them against each other.
Yeah. Feelings of dread, insomnia, shortness of breath, hallucinations is what I found was the effects of infrasound.
None of these can be right.
I mean, I think it certainly makes sense why people would look at possible causes of hysteria, because if you believe that the tent was cut open from the inside out, and if you believe that a lot of the wounds do look consistent with some sort of like fight breaking out amongst them, you would then, want to look for explanations as to like, why would they be fighting amongst themselves? How did they, So I think it does make sense, at least just from a logical perspective, that given the evidence, if you take it in a certain way, like maybe something did drive one or more of them to madness and they turned on each other and this was the result of that.
That's more plausible that maybe a smaller, like one or two of them had something that they experienced. If any of those things you said that might have like driven them against the rest of the group, that seems more plausible. I don't know. I just can't believe hallucinations or anything of that nature just because people react so differently to everything. So the fact that like all 9 of them suddenly jumped up and ran out of a tent and just started sprinting through the snow wearing not many clothes, that seems hard to believe even in this particular case.
Well, this is actually something that my wife thought of, and I kind of like it. There is one in the documentary. It mentioned that one of the group was known as being kind of like a practical jokester.
Mm-hmm.
It was Yuri Krivonishenko, I believe is how you pronounce it. If I butchered that, I apologize. He was always kind of like the happy, easygoing, like prankster of the group, and she thought that maybe during the night he decided he was going to have a little fun with his friends. The joke went sideways somehow, and that could lead to the fight. Like maybe they somehow during the joke the tent got damaged, and they were going to be exposed to the elements. Maybe tempers flared, and that could have led to altercation between people who would otherwise have gotten along, because suddenly their lives are in danger because of something that was stupid and preventable. And in the midst of all that, maybe some ran off in the confusion to try and get away from it, or it is a possibility that would explain why some of them would have been at each other's throats, and why they might have dealt grievous injuries to one another if things had gone really, really wrong.
Yeah.
So
I kind of thought that too, actually, when they specifically when they specifically mentioned him being kind of like a jokester and whatnot, like, what if he tried to play some sort of prank that just went horribly wrong?
Yeah, like, I'm a Yeti, and then it's
I mean, for all we know, like, like that could have been enough to scare them out of the tent.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like you said, maybe after he, revealed himself, or they found out what happened, that could have led to a fight.
Yeah.
I think somebody would have went back and got the clothes, though, wouldn't they?
I think.
I don't know how that would still explain 9 people not fully dressed. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they're having some sexy times.
Hey-oh, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go on to a couple more here, which I guess I'm rolling 2 kind of related ones together with this, but one we already kind of touched on, which is murder, but specifically from the Russian government themselves. And there was speculation as far as they hit a couple angles in here. One, there was that grainy photo, and I didn't catch the frame number, but it's called like frame number such and such online. Apparently it's,
I think,
like the famous photo of the group of whatever the lights were in the sky. And I don't know if that's necessarily clear when they took that photo either, but that, or the fact that they were in someplace they shouldn't have been, or the documentary also brought up that maybe a couple of the hikers may have had past jobs at places where they might be privy to some Russian secrets. So the idea here being that the government came out and eliminated these kids. And there's definitely some proof as far as injuries that they sustained that would go along with this, particularly the wounds, some of which were consistent with strangulation, it said. And then also, I was really intrigued by the line in the documentary that said some of the wrists and ankle injuries may have been from rope that was placed over clothing, which is, I've never once in my life thought about the effects of what that would do with rope over clothing, because generally it's on bare skin when I think of like somebody being tied up with your wrists or your ankles or whatnot. So that was kind of interesting as well. What do you think about this? Government comes out to kill them.
Well, it was the middle of the Cold War. If I don't hesitate to believe for a second that if the Soviet government thought that some of these people had information they shouldn't, and that there was a chance that it would get out to people who shouldn't be hearing it, I don't hesitate to believe for a second that they would not have disappeared them, so to speak.
Yeah. But it kind of felt like a cover up too. I mean, the fact that they were originally going to try to bury the body so far away.
That's true.
I feel like there are some circumstances that make it feel like there is a cover up going on.
That's true, because even that and like the autopsies both too, like why would the Russian government, really give a shit about these kids?
Yeah.
Yeah, waiting 2 days after they discovered the tent before actually looking inside or reporting it. There's a lot of weird stuff regarding the investigation that doesn't seem to add up as well. I think this one is plausible. Like the question of what it is they knew or stumbled across or saw, it's anyone's guess, really. But I do think that there's at least some plausibility to this, that the government decided that they were too close to something or had seen something they shouldn't have, and that they couldn't take a risk in letting them leave with that information.
It definitely has a lot of evidence, if you want to call it that would support them being killed, which again is, like I said, not something I had ever really thought about, that someone was there physically that killed these kids in some way. That guy was fantastic. He looked like he might have been the Yeti with his emotional range. But again, like, questions with this one would be like, these kids were like going on a hiking trip, like in the middle of Russia. Like, where were they going to run with their secret information? Higher on the mountain? I mean, they clearly weren't going up there to broadcast this to America or anyone. And then on top of that, like, why wait until that moment?
Well,
you know what I mean? Unless they were chasing these kids for days on end, in which case you think somebody that was interviewed maybe was like, yeah, this huge contingent of Russian KGB officers came through the village looking for these kids.
Well, maybe not chasing, but surveilling. I mean, KGB was not, I mean, it wasn't outside their wheelhouse to be stealthy and, very cloak and dagger. So you mentioned earlier that several of them may have worked at facilities that dealt with nuclear secrets. I believe it was 2 of the Yuris, actually. And I know we keep saying that, but there really were like 3 people involved in this thing that were named Yuri.
Yuri.
And couple that with the fact that they were college students, and maybe the fear that, being smart, being at least exposed to state secrets potentially if they were dealing with nuclear materials. And, colleges, at least over here, have always been known as being more liberal, more progressive, more open-minded. The chance that they might have been looking to defect to the States, I'm sure that it was something that was on the government's radar, especially if 2 of the Uris were involved with, working with nuclear stuff. And maybe they saw something in their history, their transcripts, their conversations that led them to think that there's a good chance that we might lose these secrets to the evil West, and we can't take that chance.
We've been monitoring their chat room and message boards.
But yeah, I mean, the fact that they were college students and thus, young and potentially, impulsive, or at least not as much in line with the communist party line as they would, as someone who was older might be, that could all of that together could have led to enough suspicion that the government decided they couldn't be allowed to live.
I think there's any chance the older guy was the plant in the group?
That would be too obvious.
Well, he was. Let's see.
He was 37.
I didn't look too deep into his history, but he was a former soldier in World War II.
Yeah.
He was an outdoorsman, and he was at least posing as a tourism instructor. But the fact that he just attached himself to this group because he needed like one more excursion to meet some sort of requirement or something like that.
Yeah, very Russell from Up vibes on that. Come on.
Yeah, it does seem very fishy to me. Like the fact that this much older guy would insinuate himself with a bunch of college students and just out of the blue and be wanting to go to the same place that they are. It strikes me as odd. It is, of course, all speculation, but I think it's a non-zero chance that he might have been. Well, I mean, he died too, though, so it kind of sucks for him if he was a government operative. But
it was for the motherland.
I mean, yeah, I guess that is the risk you take if you're a KGB spy.
Was a Maja. Yeah, I mean, even his eyeballs were missing.
Mm-hmm.
He had a bruise around his left eyebrow where the bone was exposed, open wound on the right side of his skull with exposed bone, and broken ribs 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 on the right side with 2 fracture lines. So I don't know.
Maybe the others found out he was a rat and beat the shit out of him.
The thing, and you probably have more theories, Justin, but the thing that I wanted to know most after watching the documentary again, and I've been trying to look at it online here, and I haven't really found it conclusive on this yet, is the footprints.
Mm-hmm.
So originally, this case was famous because, they had bare footprints, quote unquote, everywhere where everybody was running around out of the tent without their boots on because they didn't put them on for whatever the reason is. Mm-hmm. And they have all these footprints. And what I want to know is, how many other footprints there were, because I feel like the websites I'm looking at here, there's some other conclusions as far as like some of these footprints may have been from boots. Some of these footprints may have been like, but were there enough footprints in the area to like suggest that there was a team of 3 or 4 or 25 people that came out here to kill these kids, or was it just their footprints? Because that's a huge difference.
That is, and I don't think I've seen any conclusive account of that one way or the other, in all honesty.
And it kind of seems like nobody really took the time to mark that when they went out to look for the kids, because again, we do have to remember the context here, which is when they went out to look for these kids, they didn't find them right away. Mm-hmm. So it was a missing persons case, more or less, until they started to discover bodies eventually, which does slightly change how you look at a crime scene, I suppose, as well. Mm-hmm. But
yeah, there are certainly parts of the investigation that seem spotty at best and negligent at worst. Yeah. Which again, if this was a government mandated op to kill these kids, well, they're not kids, they were adults, but you know what I mean. Then that would also explain why the investigation was not as tight as it could have been.
Honestly, my biggest question coming from the documentary is whether or not the tent was cut from the inside out or the outside in, because like everything else I have found regarding that just states as fact that it was cut from the inside out. But in that documentary, that criminologist is like certain that it was cut the other way, and that they just were like misreading the way the stitching was or something. But she also felt like she had an agenda. So I don't know how much I believe her, if I'm being honest. Like she seemed convinced that it was like that it was a murder that took place and that like they were killed, like murdered.
Yeah, just the flip side of the coin of the Discovery Channel Yeti documentary. You know, she had an answer she wanted to find. Yeah.
So like I take what she says with a grain of salt, but it was enough to like make me curious what the truth is of that, you know, because that would completely change every other theory if it could be proven that it was cut from the outside.
True, but I agree. She is the only source I've seen that says, you know, with any certainty that the evidence points that it was cut from outside in.
I mean, the weird thing about the tent is like the possible explanations as to why you would cut yourself out of a tent blows my mind. Like I just can't fathom like they're not rushing to the door or just that's bizarre. And then if you think about it, the flip side, the explanations of someone cutting into the tent is almost equally mind-boggling, because honestly, if I was going to kill a bunch of people in a tent, and this is off the record just to be clear, I'd probably just knock the tent over and start stabbing them through the tent. Like, why would I attempt to go through the tent? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So then, weird. Like, to me, that maybe is another piece for like an avalanche hit the tent really damn hard. I don't know.
Well,
what else you got for theories, Justin?
Well, I mean, I kind of want to go through the remaining ones from like most mundane to most batshit crazy.
Okay.
But I feel this one's topical. So something that might have, and this is a little bit of a stretch, but something that might have made them, or you know, led them to have the impaired judgment to cut through the tent instead of just opening the door, is if the embers in the camp stove hadn't burned down all the way, and the carbon monoxide from it didn't kill them, but led to them, you know, having, you know, impaired judgment, impaired, you know, motor skills, that sort of thing. They might have, you know, realized, oh, the tent is filling with smoke. We can't. I'm too out of it to get the door. Here's a knife, trying to cut air holes in it, and then when that didn't work, just cutting your way out to try and get some fresh air. That one it's very mundane. I don't know how plausible it is, considering it seems like they all had experience camping and they probably wouldn't have left burning embers in the stove, but it's something that's been put forth. It also doesn't explain the bone crushing injuries or anything like that. But it might explain why they were looking to cut through the tent instead of just opening the door. Do you want me to just like keep going through the ones that got left? Okay.
I got one, but I'm sure you'll hit it at some point here.
Well, something that might have driven from the tent is ball lightning. And hey! Inside joke for those of you at home.
Case solved.
But yeah, one theory posits that during the storm that was going on that night, because there was a heavy wind and potentially snowstorm, that the conditions were right to form lightning, and ball lightning is something that can form anytime regular lightning forms. So the theory here is that that last frame of the in their camera was of ball lightning, and that maybe it came down and hovered around the tent or was coming towards them, and they freaked out, and that caused them to panic, cut their way out, and run away. I don't put a ton of stock into this because lightning can form during snowstorms, but it's pretty uncommon. Also, it seems like a very extreme reaction to a glowing light outside the tent, that to just hack your way out of the side of it and run off barefoot.
Yeah.
But it's something that's out there. Continuing on from the most sensible to the the very much not. I mentioned infrasound. I'm going to do this one first because it was brought up. Someone said something about a time vortex, and someone else came up with a theory that there was some sort of time vortex in the area because, and this seems to be the only reason, the bodies looked old. Never mind that they were exposed to the elements for weeks under the snow. They probably dehydrated because the air was very dry, what air got to them, and that tends to make a body look shriveled and kind of older than it would otherwise be. Nope. Someone saw those photos and decided that, oh no, they looked far too old for what they for the ages that they were when they set out there. And this wraps into a bunch of like a spider web of other theories involving UFOs, and that they were sent there for a reason, and that that they were not what the aliens were looking for, so or something went wrong in their dealings and they ended up lost in a time pocket or something like that. And this is one of the most batshit ones I've seen, and yet it is something that some people believe. And if any of you have any comments or quotes on any of this sort of stuff, feel free to jump in, because the one I have left that's even that I don't think we touched on at all is that they stumbled into a gravity fluctuation. And the main proponent of this seems to be a physicist, and I hate to put the air quotes because apparently this guy has patents, but a physicist from Petersburg named, where is it? German Erchenko, who I'm just going to read the section of the theories page that I stumbled across, and because I can't do this justice on my own. Russian scientists believe that the hikers came to the area where, under certain circumstances, the force of gravity can fluctuate. Petersburg physicist, PhD associate professor of the Institute of Engineering and holder of more than 100 patents, German Erchenko believes that the significantly decreased external pressure threw the hikers from the tent.
What?
Say that part again?
This I'm not going to read off his qualifications or lack thereof.
No,
but
the
he
last
believes
part.
that.
So basically, anti-gravity threw them out of their tent. Like yes. a decrease in gravity just threw them out of the tent.
Interesting.
Yes. He believes that the significantly decreased external pressure threw the hikers out from the tent. There's a bunch of things about various aspects of gravity and weightlessness on bodies and the effects that has. But he believes that the DYATLOV group came to the area, which at the confluence of circumstances can have significantly decreased force of gravity. Quote, and I swear I'm not making this up.
No.
It formed a corridor of a kind in which Earth's gravity decreased. The hikers in the tent, sleeping or just getting ready, had time to undress, and then unknown force began to lift them off the floor and drag them into the direction of the corridor, said the scientist. As the outside air pressure was significantly lower than inside the tent, quote, people began to push outwards. I think that means they were being pushed outward from the tent, not like their bodies were expanding or anything. The scientist said the emerging hikers instantly pushed the tent from the inside, and since the pressure in their bodies still remained high, they received unexplained internal injuries, including broken bones. This man apparently is a PhD.
Nah, dog.
Some of the hikers died instantly. Others remained alive for some time, but the bodies, once outside the tent, remain hovering in the air as though lying on a horizontal surface.
Nope.
In this position, the same force pulled them to the side, said the physicist. According to Erchenko's calculations, the phenomenon lasted only a few minutes. The period of time was enough to throw people 1 to 1.5 kilometers distant. They flew by one or in groups from the tent to be scattered on the slope and in the woods. When they were falling in the snow from a height, not being able to protect themselves, they received the injuries on their faces, which were disfigured, adds Erchenko. And it goes on for a little bit longer, but I think that's
enough. I'm going to say no on that one.
Yeah, yes. That's a little...
And that one, I think, earns my spot for the most outlandishly insane theory, simply because the man proposing it claims to be a PhD.
I like it. This is neither here nor there, but I just shared a link with everybody. But I see it links to just the page, not where I was reading. But if you click on or scroll down far enough where it says Zolotaryov's camera, that is a haunting image down there. Holy cow!
Yeah. Missing eyes and all that.
He's got the camera around his neck still from when they found him. This one says there were traces of urine close to the tent, and he kind of looks like he's still taking a pee. To be quite honest, it looks like he's on the phone actually.
Well, that lends itself to the time warp.
Well, this is a little interesting thing here because it says if someone was attacking them, these two guys went out to pee based on positioning and the urine place, I guess, essentially, and they might not have known these two people were out there. Or conversely, if someone was going to kill them, why not? If they knew something or if they had captured something, why not take the camera off him, essentially?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
All right. Any other wackadoodle theories here?
I mean, of course, there's UFOs.
Yeah, I had that as my last one.
You want to take helm on this one?
I don't have much on it. Just the idea that there were the lights in the sky. They had taken the pictures of something, and that is going to presuppose that you believe in extraterrestrial life. If you did, then I suppose any number of things could account for what the hell happened up there, including ray guns and disorientation and etc.
Anal probes.
Attack Wolverines.
That's why they had their clothes off. They were all anal probes.
I think this just shows the power of the human imagination, because if you see that picture, it's nothing. It's just it's literally nothing. It's just like a couple white spots. And people sure ran with that and came up with all kinds of ideas as to what that is.
Oh, wait. There's one I forgot about.
Oh, no.
And this one is both mundane and just absolutely nuts. It sounds like the plot to a Sci-Fi Channel original movie. Snowmobile. They
got murdered by a snowmobile?
That's pretty much all the theory says. That is, the snowmobile came through, ran it through the tent, ran them over, and then was never seen again. So it's a short paragraph. I just want to read it because it really does sound like the plot of a Sci-Fi Channel movie. It's not very often you come across a novel way to kill the DYATLOV group. Usually the theories give reason for the group to leave the tent, but then they kind of let nature take its course. Igor Povetkin ventures to point out what could inflict the hardest to explain and quickest to die from injuries. And again, translated from Russian, so it's a little stilted. In this version, Dubinina and Zolotaryov are run over by a snowmobile. Thibaut Brinol's head injury, the wound on Kolovatov's head, and the abrasion on Kolmogorova's side and lower back could also have been caused by a snowmobile. The author assures us that on February 1st, 1959, nothing fell out of the sky to height 1079. No flying saucers, no rocket engines, no comets with meteors. All the evil was done here below on Earth.
There it is.
All the evil.
It's just random evil snowmobiler comes through and runs over their camp, chases down the survivors, runs them over, leaves no tracks, and disappears, never to be heard from again.
Amazing.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, one thing is for sure, it seems like the police investigation done by the Russian government here was lackluster at best. The autopsies left a little something to be desired. There's a point in the documentary here where they said modern autopsies would disagree with at least 7 of the 9 people with their autopsy results as far as what might have killed that person or how they died. So it kind of does feel like this was swept under the rug a little bit, as if that was because of negligence or because of a cover-up or because
it was
honestly,
just hypothermia.
They just didn't care. That's a possibility too.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap this bad boy up here. So I'm going to have you guys tonight, I guess, since you're forcing me to host here, I'm going to say 1 being a relatively normal, explainable death, and 10 being some bizarre sentient snowmobile that killed everyone. What kind of thing killed these people? And then also shortly give us your best theory as to what you think may have explained their deaths. We will begin with Joe.
Ooh. I mean, much as I love the idea of infrasound-induced hysteria,
right?
I got to go with a 1, and I think that, especially in light of the newer study in 2021, I think the avalanche is the most likely answer. Whether they were directly killed by an avalanche or whether a small avalanche is what kind of set the chain of events in motion, I think that's our culprit.
Where's his tongue at then?
That's a good question.
All right.
Alienate it.
All right. Russian Bigfoot, whose diet is only hiker tongue.
My turn now.
All right, Justin, what do you got?
Okay. I'm mostly in line with Joe, though I'm going to, on the weirdness scale, I'm going to rate it a 3 out of 10. Simply because the confluence of events that led to the avalanche are unusual.
That's fair.
Yeah. And I do think it is the fact that they cut into the slope, disrupting the stability of the snow that was already there. The storm that was going on produced katabatic winds, which are not entirely common.
Stop saying katabatic winds, Justin. Are you drinking? Is that what's happening here? Are you doing shots?
I have been drinking, but
every time you say katabatic winds, I have to take a shot, and I'm dead over here. Come on.
Sounds like the name of an 80s yacht rock song.
Yeah, it does.
Really does.
Katabatic winds.
Next week, we will be back with our new podcast name, Katabatic Winds.
But yeah, those produced enough buildup of snow and enough force in what they chucked at the tent itself and at them as they were perhaps running away from it, that I think debris that was picked up by the 20 to 80 meter per second strong winds were probably enough to do the kind of damage that we ended up seeing. And maybe with the ones that were trying to get back to the tents, maybe the wind had died down. They were trying to make it back to whatever shelter they thought was left and just weren't able to. Some, the ones down in the ravine, they may have just decided to try and huddle together for warmth until things blew over, and things did blow over. So yeah, I think it's a set of unusual, but ultimately natural phenomenon that led to the deaths of these people. I will do a nod towards the outside chance that the government decided they needed to be erased for some reason. But my money is definitely more on the just the avalanche driving them out of the tent, and the strong winds, killing some of them and driving the others to the point where they couldn't get back.
Okay, well, what I didn't reveal for this podcast is that I actually talked to a source that has not been consulted to my knowledge about this case. And I have what is the definitive answer to the DYATLOV Pass incident after all of these years. So I went online just today and consulted with AI to ask what really happened at DYATLOV Pass. And after compiling all of the evidence online, I have been reassured by our robot gods that it was, in fact, the most mundane thing ever. A snow slab avalanche is what AI has told me that it is here, which is essentially, I believe, some form of what you're saying, both of you here. So that's AI's theory. I guess I'll give this I want to be a believer on this one, that there was something bizarre that happened here. And I guess that's buoyed by the fact that I just can't see any of these accounting for more than like 70% of the evidence that's out there. Like, all of them have holes. All of them, I guess, could be supported in some weird way. Avalanches,
we all
probably
have holes, Cody.
I know we do, but it's how we fill them that matters, Joe. We won't edit that out later. Anyway, avalanche just kind of makes sense for a lot of these things, even the injuries. When you mentioned the like hard particles hitting them at that speed, like that's something I hadn't really thought of. I just thought of like snow maybe collapsing lungs, but maybe if there had been something in it that was like an icicle or a hard chunk of ice, then hell yeah, that could definitely do some damage to you. But even that, I think, has some problems as far as why they wouldn't go back to the tent, why they would stay where they're at afterwards and try to start a fire. I don't know. The ski poles is bizarre to me on that one. The condition of the tent to me is a little weird off on that one. I hadn't seen this murder angle before, this documentary, but it's really intriguing as well. I just can't really fathom a reason why somebody would have killed them out there. I mean, it would be as unlikely that the government would do it as it would be that the locals would do it, to me, to be quite honest. So I want to say a 4.5 on our scale, because nothing fully covers all this, but it probably was the actual weather. So maybe that's an avalanche and something prevented them from getting back to the tent, I guess. So one thing I didn't think about either right away, but the documentary made me think of, they found the 4 bodies on the riverbed. They said under 12 feet of snow. Is that indicating that they were buried in 12 feet of snow from an avalanche, or it had snowed 12 feet since they were up there? Or I didn't really...
I think
who knows, I guess, right?
Latter. I'll just do average snowfall.
I guess it could be any of them, but I was curious why some of the bodies seem to be so near the surface, like the first 2 they found, and then those
it was what, like a month or more between until they found those other 4?
Was that long?
At least
okay,
3 weeks. Yeah.
I think it. So I think it's possible that it just snowed that much.
So they probably just missed them because they were under like a few feet of snow, and then eventually kept burying and burying. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay,
and it's not necessarily just a matter of snowfall, but snow can blow and cover an area that way too. And if they were in a lower elevation, then the snow blowing around could have accounted for more than just what was falling.
Excellent. Any final comments today, gents? We've been on here a bit, so we'll wrap this up. If anybody is interested, check out. Go ahead, Joe.
I just had a really bad thought about a Cold War joke, but I'll so sorry.
I think it was the Americans.
Maybe.
If anybody's interested, the documentary An Unknown Compelling Force was interesting. It's on YouTube and Tubi also, yeah. Justin says you could check that out.
I'd say it was worth a watch.
There's a gazillion, shorter documentary style things you could check out on YouTube. As mentioned, this is one of the more famous unsolved cases, I feel like, out there, especially non-US, that we would know about. But anyway, there we go. So we're mostly thinking this is kind of mundane, probably something in the avalanche realm or frostbite. Maybe they weren't so far off on the autopsies after all. All right. Anything else from our gents out there tonight?
No, it's been an interesting bit of research. I do enjoy these sorts of episodes, especially when there's this much material to go off of. So I look forward to the next time we do something like this.
All right. Joe, how did you enjoy joining us for one of these?
I support Ukraine.
Oh yes.
Boom 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 bada doom doom.
No, it's been. I mean, it's been fun. It's been interesting. I mean, like I said at the beginning, I really did not know anything about this situation, and it immediately captured my imagination. I definitely see why there has been so much discussion about it over the decades, and why there is still so much debate over what actually happened, because there's just so much conflicting evidence and nothing very conclusive. Yeah, it's a really interesting topic. So I would definitely be interested in possibly doing another one of these in the future, if only so I can try to catch up with Justin.
I may have missed it, but did you say your wife gave her best guess explanation?
I have not asked her.
Oh, okay.
I would assume that she would probably also land on the mundane side of things, but
I'll have to ask her.
I'll have to ask her after this.
Get back to us on that one. All right, everybody. This has been another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing, the Fawn Pod, the Fawncast. Check us out every week on your favorite social media platforms and also your podcast streams, wherever you're at. And we are going to end today with everyone singing our theme song in their best Russian accent.
Fun.
That sounds really familiar. What is that? Friends of the Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Don't.